The morning it happened, I was sipping coffee on my back porch, admiring my garden, when I noticed something strange. My dog, Rusty, trotted toward the grass, sniffed the air, and stopped dead in his tracks. He growled, backing away as if sensing something unnatural. Then I saw it. A bubbling, putrid pool was forming right where my tomatoes used to grow. It was thick, dark, and reeked of something so foul that my stomach lurched. The smell hit me like a brick wall, an overpowering stench of human waste and rot. I took an uneasy step forward, my brain scrambling for an explanation. A burst pipe? A septic backup? But I wasn't on septic. I lived in Maple Grove Estates, a community with an HOA-maintained sewage system. My house was on the lowest part of the neighborhood, but that had never been a problem before. Then I saw the stream. A steady flow of raw sewage trickled down from an unseen source uphill, snaking its way onto my property like an invading army. I followed the sickening trail with my eyes, my pulse spiking. The garden I had spent years perfecting. Gone. My workshop, where I built furniture to sell, ruined. My tools, my materials, everything I worked for, soaked in filth. Panic set in. This wasn't just a leak. This was a disaster. I sprinted inside, slammed the windows shut to keep the stench out, and grabbed my phone. Someone had to fix this. Someone had to take responsibility. And I knew exactly where to call. I dialed the HOA emergency line, my fingers trembling. 20 minutes of hold music later, a voice answered. Maple Grove Estates. This is Karen Thompson, she said, her tone dripping with the fake politeness of someone who couldn't care less. I knew Karen. Everyone did. She wasn't just the HOA president. She was Maple Grove's self-appointed queen. There's sewage flooding my property. I said, my voice tight with frustration. It's coming from the neighborhood's plumbing system. Karen sighed as if I had just asked her to personally mop it up. Oh, that? We authorized some minor plumbing adjustments yesterday. It's probably just a temporary side effect. A side effect? My entire yard is covered in sewage. I snapped. This is a health hazard. You need to send someone immediately. Well, our maintenance team isn't available until next week, she replied, her voice laced with boredom. I suppose if you try calling a private plumber, but HOA regulations state you need our written approval before modifying community infrastructure. I gritted my teeth. I don't need approval. I need you to fix the mess your HOA caused. Karen chuckled, and it was the kind of laugh that made my blood boil. Well, Mr. Reynolds, perhaps you should have thought about potential drainage issues before buying in Maple Grove. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just being lazy. She was enjoying this. I'd always been the odd one out in this neighborhood. I didn't drive a luxury car or throw wine and cheese parties. I built furniture with my hands, drove a 10-year-old truck, and minded my own business. And Karen? She had made it clear from the day I moved in that she didn't think I belonged here. This isn't over, I said, my voice cold. Karen gave a little hum of amusement. Oh, I'm sure it isn't. I hung up, my hands clenched into fists. If the HOA wasn't going to help, I'd find another way. The next morning, I set out to track the source of the sewage myself. If I couldn't get help, I'd get proof. Following the foul-smelling stream uphill, I reached a small patch of HOA-maintained common ground near a row of bushes. That's when I saw it. A thick, gray pipe, freshly installed, jutted out of the ground, and it was actively spewing waste directly toward my property. I grabbed my phone and started recording. They did this. The HOA. As I filmed, movement caught my eye. Across the street, a man in a pristine suit walked his little white poodle, a stark contrast to the filth surrounding me. Howard Wilkins, the HOA treasurer. Howard? I called. He hesitated, then forced a smile. Oh, hello there, Mr. Reynolds. I pointed to the pipe. Do you know what this is? Howard's expression barely flickered. Looks like a drainage pipe? I narrowed my eyes. A drainage pipe that wasn't here last week and is now dumping sewage into my yard. Howard shrugged. Must be a county issue. You should call them. Karen told me the HOA authorized plumbing changes. So which is it? A flicker of something. Fear passed through his eyes before his mask returned. I have no knowledge of any such installation. I stepped forward. So if I call the county and they say they have no record of this, what do you think they'll find? Howard adjusted his tie, suddenly eager to leave. Well, I'd love to help, but Precious needs her morning walk. He turned on his heel and practically sprinted away, dragging his confused little poodle behind him. I stared at the pipe, my fists clenching. They were lying to my face. But now I had proof. By day 3, the sewage had spread. The putrid smell seeped through my walls, into my carpets, into my clothes. My dog whimpered every time I tried to take him outside. And then the phone call started. Not from the HOA. From my neighbors. Reynolds, what the hell is going on? One of them snapped. Our kids can't even play outside because of smell. I called the HOA, I said. They did this. I don't care who did it. Just clean it up. Then another call. Then another, each angrier than the last. And I realized what happened. Karen had told them it was my fault, that I was responsible, that my plumbing had failed. I checked the neighborhood forum. There was a post from Karen. Due to a maintenance issue at Mr. Reynolds' property, neighbors may experience temporary odor disturbances. Please rest assured the HOA is investigating. They were pinning it all on me. I wasn't just fighting the HOA anymore. I was fighting my entire neighborhood. I needed help. Someone who could prove, without a doubt, that this wasn't my doing. That's when I found Stanley Martinez. Stanley wasn't just a plumber. He was an independent plumber. The kind who didn't care about HOA politics. The kind who had nothing to lose by telling the truth. He arrived in an old truck with Martinez Plumbing. We flush your troubles away, painted on the side. He took one look at my yard and whistled. This is criminal. I watched as he pulled out tools, ran tests, and dug into the dirt. Hours passed. Finally, he called me over. See this? He pointed to the underground pipe. It's brand new, installed just a few weeks ago. My heart pounded. So this wasn't a coincidence. Stanley shook his head. Not even close. Someone rerouted the HOA sewage to dump here, on purpose. I swallowed hard. Can you prove it? Stanley held up his camera. Oh, I can do better than that. I can document it. And just like that, I had everything I needed. They thought they could flood my property, destroy my life, and get away with it. They had no idea who they were messing with. I barely slept that night. Stanley's report sat on my kitchen table. Pages spread out like battle plans. I had photographs, soil tests, timestamps, and diagrams. Undeniable proof that the HOA had diverted their sewage onto my land. But as I stared at the evidence, a thought kept gnawing at me. Why? Why go through all this trouble? Why risk breaking the law just to ruin my property? I needed to dig deeper. At dawn, I drove to the county records office. If the HOA had modified the plumbing, they had to have filed permits, right? I spent hours flipping through documents, my fingers getting paper cuts from all the useless files. But when I finally found the records from Maple Grove Estates, my blood ran cold. The permits for the community center's plumbing system didn't exist. They had never legally connected to the main sewer line. Instead, they'd used my land as a dumping ground to avoid paying for proper drainage. I clenched my fists. This wasn't negligence. It wasn't an accident. It was a calculated crime. And that's when I found something even worse. A new file recently submitted. A proposal for Maple Grove cul-de-sac expansion, right where my property stood. A lump formed in my throat. They weren't just trying to ruin my home. They were trying to force me out. I turned the page and saw the name of the development company behind the project. Thompson Development, LLC. Karen Thompson's husband's company. I sat back in my chair, gripping the file so tightly my knuckles turned white. They wanted my land. They had always wanted my land. And they were willing to destroy my life to get it. But they had made one massive mistake. They underestimated me. That evening, as I checked my email, I noticed something strange. An email chain. At first, I thought it was spam, until I saw the subject line. Reynolds situation, containment strategy. My stomach dropped. Somehow, someone had accidentally CC'd me in an internal HOA board email. I clicked it open, my hands shaking. Howard, The diversion was necessary. Fixing the main line would have required a $22,000 special assessment per household. Karen, Reynolds' lot was always meant to be a drainage point anyway. If he complains, we deny everything. He can't afford legal action, and by the time the county inspector responds, we'll have our story straight. Another board member. His house is the cheapest in the neighborhood anyway. Should have never been approved. I read those words over and over, my vision going red. They thought they could ruin my home, steal my land, and get away with it. I printed every email, stuffing the pages into a binder. Then I made 3 copies. I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to destroy them. I couldn't do this alone. The next morning, I called a few neighbors who had given me sympathetic looks at the last HOA meeting. Come by for coffee, I told them. We need to talk. 5 showed up, each with their own horror story. Jennifer, who used a wheelchair, clenched her fists as she spoke. They denied my ramp request 3 times, said it would disrupt the neighborhood aesthetic. I had to pay $7,000 to install myself, and they still fine me for it. Michael Chin nodded. They fined me $500 a day for my solar panels until I took them down, even though state law protects solar installations. One by one, they shared their stories. HOA abuse, unfair fines, selective enforcement, threats. By the end of the meeting, we had formed an official group, Maple Grove Homeowners for Fair Treatment. I handed them copies of the emails. They're trying to steal my land. I said, they're destroying my home, and they will keep doing this until someone stops them. Jennifer looked up. So what's the plan? I smiled for the first time in days. We're going to make sure the HOA has a mess they can't ignore. That evening, I called my cousin, Ryan. Ryan owned Reynolds Concrete, a small business passed down in our family for generations. I told him everything about the sewage, the conspiracy, the emails. They need to be taught a lesson, I said. And I need your help. Ryan hesitated. You're talking about concrete, aren't you? I didn't answer. A long silence. Then, damn right, I'm in. We spent hours working out the details. I scouted the HOA office, noting security cameras, entry points, and when Karen's employees left for the day, the office was perfectly positioned, right in the middle of a shopping center, scheduled to be closed for renovations next week. No one would notice anything until it was too late. And best of all, Karen had just moved everything important out, except the filing cabinets full of HOA records. The plan was simple. Ryan's truck, disguised with temporary county maintenance signs, a rubber hose fed through the mail slot, and 20 cubic yards of quick-drying industrial concrete. A flood for a flood. Ryan clapped me on the shoulder. When do we do this? I looked at the sewage still coating my yard, at the broken remains of my garden, and at the binder of emails proving their corruption. Tomorrow night, 1:58 a.m. Ryan's concrete truck idled 2 blocks away, its engine a low hum in the silent night. I slipped on gloves, adjusted my mask, and double-checked my work. The HOA office was dark, just as expected. The side door lock? Easier to pick than a cheap suitcase. Ryan uncoiled the thick rubber hose, feeding it through the mail slot. You sure about this? He whispered. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The pump roared to life. Thick, gray concrete gushed into the office. First, Karen's pristine desk disappeared. Then the cabinets holding all the HOA's records, the files they had altered, the violations they had faked, the proof of their crimes. Sinking, drowning, gone. I left my mark, literally. I pressed my work gloves into the half-set concrete on Karen's desk, leaving a permanent handprint, a reminder. As Ryan shut off the pump, we stepped back. The office was filled to the brim. The doors wouldn't open. Nothing could be salvaged. By the time anyone discovered what had happened, it would be too late. We drove off, the night swallowing us whole. My heart hammered, my stomach twisted. Had I just gone too far? Maybe. But then I remembered the sewage, the emails, the lies, and I smiled. Tomorrow, Karen Thompson would wake up to a nightmare of her own. 8:30 a.m. I sipped my coffee from my porch, watching the neighborhood wake up. Down the street, the HOA office sat in eerie silence. No frantic workers. No Karen barking orders. Just a locked-up building filled to the brim with solid concrete. Then the chaos began. Karen pulled into the parking lot in her spotless white Mercedes, stepping out in her usual power stance. Heels clicking, sunglasses perched on her nose like she was some kind of celebrity. She strutted toward the front door, coffee cup in one hand, a clipboard in the other. The moment she turned the handle, she stumbled backward. The door wouldn't budge. She tried again, jamming her shoulder against it. The hinges groaned but didn't move. Confused, she fished out her keys and unlocked the door, only to push against an immovable gray wall. For a few seconds, she stood there, frozen. Then she took a step back, looking through the office's giant window. That's when she saw it. The entire HOA office was gone, buried beneath feet of hardened concrete. Her coffee cup slipped from her fingers. Her clipboard hit the pavement. And then, at the top of her lungs, she screamed, "Reynolds!" From my porch, I smirked. She knew, but knowing and proving were two very different things. I expected police, maybe some angry HOA members. What I didn't expect was a man in a suit knocking on my door just an hour later. I opened it cautiously. "Mr. Reynolds?" I nodded. The man extended a business card. "Daniel Wright, District Attorney's Office, Environmental Crimes Division." My stomach dropped. They knew. But then Daniel gave me a small, knowing smile. "We received your complaint about the illegal sewage dumping." Wait, he wasn't here for the concrete. He was here for Karen. "We've actually been building a case against Mrs. Thompson for months," Daniel continued. "Bribery, embezzlement, environmental fraud." He reached into his briefcase, pulling out a thick file. "Your evidence? It's a nail in the coffin." I blinked. "So, you don't care about what happened to the office?" Daniel chuckled. "Oh, we care. But unless you're admitting to something, all we see is an unfortunate accident." He raised an eyebrow. "And, well, accidents happen." I couldn't help but grin. "Would you be willing to testify?" Daniel asked. I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." By noon, the street was lined with news vans. Reporters swarmed the HOA office, cameras rolling as officials examined the solid tomb of concrete where Karen's domain once stood. But the real show happened inside the HOA board meeting. Karen stood at the podium, red-faced, pointing directly at me. "He did this. He's a criminal. He should be arrested," she shrieked. But Daniel Wright calmly stepped forward, holding up a warrant. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "this is an official order to seize your financial records and personal accounts for investigation into fraud, environmental crimes, and embezzlement." Karen's face drained of color. "What?" Then, before anyone could process what was happening, Howard Wilkins, the HOA treasurer, bolted for the door. 2 officers tackled him before he made it 10 feet. As his briefcase hit the ground, documents spilled out. Bank statements, HOA funds, money transfers to Thompson Development LLC, evidence of millions in stolen funds. Karen stumbled backward, clutching the podium for support. She knew it was over. By the time they cuffed her, half the neighborhood had gathered outside, watching. She glared at me, eyes filled with hatred. "This isn't over," she hissed. I leaned in. "Yes, Karen, it is." And as the police dragged her away, I swear I saw a neighbor smiling. After Karen and Howard's arrests, the remaining HOA board members resigned in disgrace. A neighborhood vote was held. Jennifer was elected as the new HOA president. Her first act? Approving her own wheelchair ramp. Michael got his solar panels reinstated. And my yard? The county forced the HOA's insurance to pay for every bit of damage. They removed the sewage, replaced my soil, rebuilt my workshop, and even installed a brand new garden. Jennifer approached me one evening, smiling. "We'd like you to join the HOA board." I shook my head. "I've had enough HOA drama for one lifetime." She laughed. "Fair enough. But if you ever change your mind..." I grinned. "I'll stick to the community garden." Months later, as Maple Grove thrived under its new leadership, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a small, square piece of solid concrete, mounted like a trophy. A note was attached. Thought you might want a souvenir. Sometimes, the hardest problems need the strongest solutions. Daniel Wright. I placed it on my desk. A reminder that when you're pushed too far, when injustice piles up, when people think you're too small to fight back, you fight anyway. And if you do it right, you win.